Hi everyone, welcome back to the painting table. We'll be working on our donkey next, and you'll need Nimbus Gray on your palette and the number 8 oval dry brush. To start with our dry brushing, load your brush with the paint and swirl it out on a paper towel. We'll work on the inner ears first. Very lightly start out the color inside the ear like so. The brightest of the highlight needs to be in the corner right there of the ear. We can touch up our base coat later. And let's get the other ear. Now let's dry brush the face area, and I'm actually going to be going over some of the base coat on the mane. Moving down into the nose area. There we go. And then now in the chest area, we'll start in the center of the chest and work out from there. You want the edges to be nice and soft. And then brighter in the center. Now let's dry brush highlights on the legs. The brightest would be on the knee, right on the edge here, and down the leg. And then as you move towards the inner legs, it should soften. As the Nimbus Gray dries, it starts to darken. So to brighten it up, we'll need to add warm white to our Nimbus Gray. So with that, you'll need to add warm white to your palette. Take your dirty brush and mix it into the warm white to create a lighter gray. And then wipe that on your paper towel. And we'll start at the top again with the ears. We'll brighten up those highlights. And remember, you don't need to cover what you previously did completely. Just a touch of highlight in the center. You're concentrating on the brightest area of that highlight. And brighten up the nose area, and then the middle of the chest area. And remember, I have no water in my brush. This is a very soft highlight. And then down to the knees. You can go down the legs a bit too. I'm going to brighten the chest a little more. Let's add the rosy color to the cheeks and ears next. You need rose pink on your palette and your number 6 oval dry brush. I'm scrubbing the color out on my paper towel because I really don't want any blotchiness in this dry brushing. I want to add a little color to the inside of the ears. Okay, that's perfect. You don't want too much. Just a slight wisp of color. There we go. And now adding it to the cheeks. I want to be careful and stay right on the face as I'm adding this color. Now return and touch up your base coat colors. I can see I need it in my ears and my mane and a touch on my hooves. So the colors you need are the dark gray mix to touch up the ears, and raw umber for the mane, and black for the hooves. Next in line, we'll dry brush the donkey's mane. You'll need olive branch on your palette. I have my number 8 oval dry brush, loading and taking out some of the color on a paper towel. And let's start in the center. Okay, that's our first layer. So the second layer is husk to brighten up the highlight. So put husk on your palette. I'm just going to use my dirty brush. I've wiped it out the best I can, like so. It's still dry. And I'll load some husk on my brush. And now starting again in the center, very lightly scrub the surface. Okay, I can put more pressure on. I don't have a lot of paint in my brush, so it's allowing me to add more pressure. The next area we're going to dry brush is the top of the ears, and we'll do that with the same base coat mix that we use to base coat the donkey itself. The mix looks like this. It's a medium gray, and I'll be using my number 6 dry brush. We're adding color to the top of each ear. The brightest part is right on the edge. And then you can carry that on over to the side of the ear also. And to further brighten up that highlight, let's add a little more warm white to the mix. We'll start at the edge there. That's the brightest area. And then moving over to the side. The last area to dry brush are the hooves, and we'll be doing that with the color Cornflower. So put a drop of that on your palette, and we'll be using the number 6 oval dry brush. I've taken out the color on my paper towel, and I'm moving over to the hooves. I want a blue highlight right in the middle of each hoof. So I've applied the first layer of highlight, and it looks like it could be a little bit brighter. So I'm going to add a smidgen of warm white to the tip of my brush and wipe that off on a paper towel, and very carefully add a little bit more brightness. You don't want it to overpower the blue. Just brighten it up in the center. Since Josonia is a pure paint and doesn't have all the mediums added, we want to make sure and set our paint, all the work that we've done so far, before we get into the floating. So take a moment and put a thin coat of clear glazing medium over your donkey. This way, if we have any mistakes when we're adding the detail, we can easily wipe them off. Okie dokie, we're ready to do our floating. So we need raw umber on our palette, and we need our number 12 flat. I'm loading my brush. And I have my mop ready just in case. We're floating at the base of the ears. And now around the chin and the mouth. And this was where I'll need my mop for sure. I'm letting that dry, and then eventually I'll need to add another layer of floating to deepen the color. Okay, now floating between the legs, I'm working on just the right side, and it's one long float. I'm trying to meet up my line with the hoof. There we go. There's a few more areas we need to add some floating. One is the nostrils, and then also right here at the bottom of the chest. I'm still using my raw umber. Okay, and then the other side. You want to make sure they match each other. And then under the chest, delicately add this float so you don't pull up the other float. And I just take the other end of my brush and erase the edges here. At this point, you can apply a light coat of clear glazing medium to set your work. Now that we have a nice barrier over our project, we'll use carbon black to add another float to deepen the shading. Now you can see carbon black has a ton of pigment in it, and we want to reduce it down so it's not so strong. So always work the float on the palette first and lighten it up, and then go to your piece. You can determine if you need it to be darker then, but it's much better to go in lighter first. So that looks good to me. The ears are done, now the nostrils. And now the cheeks. I'm going to stop there and let that dry. In the meantime, to the other side. And now under the nose. It's a little tough going around a curve like that. It's nice to have a mop brush, for sure. Bring the floating down between the legs. Then carefully float underneath the chest. With our floating finished, we can move on and transfer the rest of the pattern lines. We have some hair in the ears that needs to be transferred, our lines in the hair, our rope on the nose, and the fur lines on the chest. I've transferred the remaining pattern lines onto my donkey, the rope across the nose, and the lines in the mane. I also have warm white on my palette so I can get ready for lining. You'll need your detailer brush or your liner brush, whatever's more comfortable for you. Load your brush with the warm white in preparation for lining, and then stroke tiny little wispy lines in each of his ears. And now the other side. Now let's line the hair on his chest. I'm going to turn him around and pull the strokes towards myself. The hair fans out from the center. There was an open spot down here that needed to be filled in, so I dry brushed it with Nimbus Gray. And that seemed to do the trick. Next we'll work on the rope around his nose, so you'll need to add raw umber to your palette. Load your liner brush with raw umber and then stroke each twist of the rope. Each twist on the rope looks like a small S. Now we'll highlight the rope sections with olive branch, so have this on your palette. And use your liner brush. I'm just touching on color at the top of each section. Then the last highlight stroked on the rope is with the color husk. And these are tiny little comma strokes. We are so close to being done with the donkey, all we have left is to do the mane. First we'll be lining the highlights on the hair with the color olive branch. Just follow your guidelines as best you can. You can barely see them, but they'll come alive as we add more color. Next, make a mix of olive branch and marigold at a 1:1 ratio. So now with that color, we'll build on our highlights. Okay, I don't need to line over everything, but I did line over the majority of the highlights with this new color. To build more highlights, add husk to your palette. And then I'll add one up here. Since some of my highlights aren't standing out as much as I like them to, I'm going to go in with straight marigold and build on those. Now to create some contrast, I'm using the raw umber that's still on my palette, and I'm going to work in between my highlights, just a few of them. We are finished with our donkey. Congratulations! So you can put him aside and he can wait his turn to be splattered at the very end.